This week in the conversation, I have the honor to receive an old friend, prolific writer, Fazle Chowdhury. But this time he's with us with a brand new title, a wonderful novel titled Finding Alexei. Interesting, investigating, interesting novel. But before we get to this wonderful, interesting conversation with my friend Fazle Chowdhury, I just want also to remind you that this week and throughout the month, or throughout the spring, I would say, I have a new title. It's not really new, but it's the second edition of Midnight at Noon that I have been promoting in full swing right now, available for pre-ordering. I just want to show you, I do have a copy with me, Midnight at Noon, second edition. You can always pre-order now if you want to. All right, so don't forget also to continue to support the CSMS magazine and also the conversation. Subscribe to it and also tell your friends about it too. Yes. So without further ado, let's get started. Once again, my name is Ardain Isma, and I'm here this evening with an old friend, a seasoned author, prolific writer, Fazle Chowdhury. Fazle, it's such an honor to have you again. It's always a pleasure to sit down and have a conversation with you. It's always a highly motivated intellectual conversation when we talk about the books. But this time you come with a very new one. I mean, it is so intriguing, Fighting Alexei. And then you begin the story with all the rats of Baghdad. Move just here. But why did you come up with such a very, I would say, intriguing, but also it's like a teaser. You're trying to tease the reader or creating a hook, to trap the reader there. Why did you come up with this? Yes.
Well, first of all, Ardain, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to see you again, talk to you again. Uh, Again, so the story, I mean, there was, all of us, when we drive, there's traffic, there's other things that come in place. When I was, traveling overseas, there were times that one of the privileges I had was taxi drivers swearing at their local language. And this phrase stayed with me for a very long time. And I was having writer's block when I was writing this novel. It was probably one of the most difficult novels I had to write. And one day I was just like looking through my old journals and my old writing pieces, and there it was, there it was. I remember recollecting somebody while I was in a taxi ride that he was just livid about the nature of the traffic, and he was swearing like there was no end tomorrow. But he kept on apologizing after every other sentence, saying, "Oh, I'm really sorry." you know.
Yeah, you're creating, a scenario, a scene that is so interesting, and which reminds me of the streets of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. When you talk about those potholes,
Yeah.
yeah, and I know exactly this is, in most developing countries,
Mm.
where the roads are poorly maintained, and
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
navigating through traffic, and
Yeah. No,
horn
I mean,
blowing and blaring, bam, bam, bam,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
know the scene. I can picture it
exactly.
in my mind.
Exactly. And I think, like, I'm sure you can say that, between the loud noises, between every commotion that's going on around as the traffic is going on as it is, and the car is trying to maneuver its way out, it's never a smooth ride. So sometimes I think as a driver in those kind of scenarios, you are unable to contain that frustration. It
I
just
know. I know.
comes out.
So the protagonist of the story is Sofia Tresca, which is an ambitious CEO of a very high-tech hedge fund, and also is on the verge of acquiring a majority stake at a global oil and gas company. I have two questions for you. It's one of them and two. The first one I would is what inspired you to create Sophia Triska's character, and the second one, how did you shape her moral dilemma in the high stake world of hedge fund? Because I know exactly what hedge fund managers, what they do, the CEOs, and all deals. How did you manage to do that?
So it's a very nice question that
Let's
you've
begin with
asked.
Sophia first.
Yeah, so Sophia Tresca is loosely based on a very good friend of mine and a
Really?
woman that I absolutely adore.
Wow.
She is she's just an incredible woman and an incredible person, and the characteristics of her is not entirely that of my friend. But there are etiquettes that I had basically put in that characteristics.
Uh-huh.
As for the hedge fund, I was when I was I think was 26, 27 years old. I worked at a hedge fund, and it was one of the most aggressive environments to work in.
Mhm.
And I can honestly tell you that it was, I think every morning there was something or someone that would cause some kind of a problem where your daily schedule would be kind of like thrown off the radar and thrown off. And you had to basically make things work. You had to make things work because if you didn't, you'd be in trouble. Because you're handling the responsibilities of the company, then there comes the clients, then there comes the leadership. So there's a lot of things that you're juggling at that same moment. And so to make that work, there's a lot of things going on. And I remember once being stuck in an elevator with three CEOs of a hedge fund. And, as I stayed quiet, they were talking about some of the problems that they were confronting as
Okay.
things were coming about. And it's been almost 2 decades since, and, here I am now. And when I was writing this novel, I kept on going back to those moments to think,
Okay.
all right, what is it that I can build upon? What is it that I can build as kind of like a story around this character to make sure that there's as much turbulence as possible so that readers can actually get a glimpse of what it's like working in or actually being in that kind of a space to understand, okay, oh my God, there's so much going on. How do they juggle it all?
And you know what? They say that those who work in the corporate world, there's always this element of uncertainty. Each day they get up, and go to work. But they say particularly if you work in an hedge fund environment, just like people, most of them, they just like living tigers. Uh, you have a feeling that you live, uh, someone, you have the expression, the edge of the abyss.
Yes. Yeah. I think you said it very nicely. Yes, it is kind of like that. I mean, I remember once it was, I think, about 11:30 at night, and I was leaving my office, and I get a phone call, and you couldn't just leave it. You had this anxiety that, okay, if you left it, who could it be? Maybe it was something important. So I picked it up. And of course, it was for my partner in crime at the time, and said, like, I really would like to speak to him at this time. And I said, I'm really sorry he's not here. I'm here. I guess you can send him an email and let him know what's going on. And it's like, no, no, Fazle, let me speak to you about it. And that conversation went on for about an hour. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I didn't get home, I think, that night until like 3 in the morning, only to come back to the office around 7.
Wow.
So yeah, there is a lot of that. And I think you're driven. The individuals that work there are driven, but there's a camaraderie of sorts with the leadership. There's a camaraderie in the sense that, we're doing this, but we're doing this because there's a mutual respect we have for our leader. We have a mutual respect for what we have for our clients. And that was pretty much like I remember once, like, I was really tired. I couldn't find like that adrenaline rush, and I remember the CEO of the company coming in and saying, "Great work. I love the analysis you did. By the way, can you make that a little more refined?
Yeah.
And little more refined would mean an hour of work."
Okay. Oh, we write it probably to his liking, right? As that.
That's right, yeah. And I was just like, "Do you need it now?" And he was like, "I kind of do." and and
So
just
it's like
before
they
he,
take people as like robots, right?
I mean, you could say that, but there's a human element to it, because the human element is, your boss says to you that, okay, once this is done, you can take some time off, you can relax a little bit. That's really true, and I remember, like, the one thing he said to me was like, "I love what you did. If you can refine it, that'd be fantastic. Tomorrow morning we'll review it, and after that, you know, let me know your schedule for the next week. Maybe you want to take some time off. Maybe you want to like take it easy. You tell me what works for you." And for me at that time, I was like, yeah, I could certainly use a few days off, and I remember, like, afterwards, I said to him, "Sir, I'm really tired. Um, would you be willing to give me a couple of days off?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. Take as long as you like." Okay. And then I came back all refreshed, and again, same thing.
Well, that's the incentive, yeah. And that listening to you talking, which it reminds me of my youngest son. He's
Okay.
a software engineer, and he works for a corporation around the DC area.
Okay.
And he talks to Dad every day about his frustration and everything you say now, Oh, because of Papi, I'm tired of this. This is, just like the whole world is coming down on me, I feel besieged by things that I have to do. So I know exactly. Yeah. But then again, in the same talking, they give him very nice bonuses, and then they give him, they shower him with so many, I guess maybe that's the on the flip side, they have a way to probably
Yeah.
pamper you to keep you.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There's a flip side to it. But what is interesting, and I think your readers might be interested, including yourself, is that how I see the individuals that I work with for so many long hours. Uh, 20 years later, how they've become. A lot of them have become artists, a lot of them have become writers, a lot of them, surprisingly, have gone into different careers. And I'm talking a total U-turn. And once in a while now, when, we get a chance to speak, we get a chance to correspond by email or whatnot, the personality has changed. That strength that we used to have at 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, of course, that's no longer there.
Mm.
But there's different kind of characteristics that we have. Some of us are much more, I guess, jovial, happier. Others are much more bitter. you know uh, because that's the nature of how time has gone, or
Exactly.
become.
Hmm.
And that's something I tried to show even in this novel
Yeah,
between.
that's precisely what I was going to ask you, Fazelle, because I know your novel really explored what we call financial secrecy,
Yes.
and the corporate intrigue that too often we talk about, and of course also the moral compromise. So how did you get, because you pin those three elements and the story so finely. So how did you manage to do that? I know
Well,
you've had experience, working with, in the corporate world,
yeah,
but
well, I mean, so it was very difficult to do that, because I think if you were to make a real assessment, that is the thing that took the longest. You can write a story, you can write a story from beginning to end, you can develop your characters, but the twists and the turns and the details and the sub details,
right.
that was very, very difficult. Because I remember once, I have a friend who had a similar experience with me. We're still, talk about some of those experiences from our past. And the first time when I had him read the draft, he said, "This is rubbish. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, there's no way somebody can, like, buy an oil and gas company by themselves. Like, that's impossible. There's a lot of capital involved. There's a huge team involved. There's a transaction involved. Just doesn't happen with one person. And I was like, of course it does. And we kind of had this argument back and forth. But in this course of this argument, when I actually sat down to write, I started thinking about other things. It's like, okay, if I was a CEO of a company and I didn't have the capital to buy such a large company, what would I do? What route would I take? Do I need assistance? Do I need to figure out a different way of transactions? Which are the kind of people I absolutely need to kind of sway on my side? Who are the people that I could probably say, I'm going to invest this much amount of time, and if it doesn't work out, I'm going to move on.
Right.
So these are the kind of questions that, I wrote pages after pages in my notes to trying to figure out how would I particularly put this together. And keep in mind, I'd come up with all of this after I had finished the first draft. So I was struggling with, okay, I figured this out. How do I put this back in? Because it's kind of like a very difficult set of pieces that you have to basically maneuver as you tell the story. And so I remember second or third draft onwards, as I gave it to some of my other friends, they were like, yeah, this is actually true, but you need some kind of a twist here. Okay. Because, I'm not totally buying it. And
Really?
after a few more tries, when I started putting in more real details about what I remembered from my time back, they became convinced. They were like, "Oh my god! Like, oh wait, I can understand. Yes, I can relate to the CEO. I can relate to this person that I know." So yes, it was really like not really a linear process, but something a comedy of errors. To be honest with you.
And you know what? The death of the lead editor is the pivotal moment of the story, like a turning point of the story. So, how does this event shift the stakes of for Triska, the
Yes.
protagonist?
Yeah.
And what challenges that's the next? What challenges did you face in crafting the suspense around it? Because I also felt I was moving on edge when I was reading this particular passage. So how did you do
So
that? You write very descriptively, and I think it helps a lot. Yeah. So how did you?
so so to be honest with you, so the lead auditor, the character of the lead auditor is someone who I remember, who I absolutely, this was an individual that I absolutely had no respect for.
So that's why you painted him this way, right? How's that?
Yes, I mean, he's loosely based on a person I knew probably a decade back, might have been a longer. But it was very easy for me to paint that character in such a, I would say, in a non-moral way. And even to build events around it, because I knew auditors. I worked as an auditor even before, so I knew what it meant if a transactional auditor, for some reason knew something about their client, something that was mildly disruptive, could be used against them. And this, by the way, happens almost all the time. It's just, sometimes it comes in the news, sometimes it doesn't. But from my personal experience, I tried to create that world in such a way where they were one character was vulnerable to the events of the other. And so when this lead auditor is basically killed, it puts the other character, Sophia Tresca, in a very difficult situation because this person knows a lot, but whoever killed him, I have no idea who that was, whether it was a he or a she, and does that person know more about me than the lead auditor? So this creates this kind of a weird scenario of fear, mystery, kind of like a thriller setting that I was able to put together to really give the readers this kind of an angle to say that, you know, we always have competition in the workplace. We always have challenges in acquisitions, in
Right.
acquiring companies. But
Right.
as a CEO, there's a lot at stake here. And so once the conflict from work is spreading outside the workplace, it can create a lot of tension. And that's what I was able to do here.
And you know what? one thing also that I realized in the novel is that, the several themes, like themes of power, secrecy, ethical ambiguity, dilemmas. So you manage like you just like someone who's working a thin blue line as a writer, you know, you manage to craft this element and put him, and it's just like you put these things under one roof, and you do the best you can to make someone who may have never been exposed to this understand you and follow you. So I'm pretty sure that you did a lot of revise on this one, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting thing that you mentioned because initially, when I first submitted it to a few people who were considering it to publish it, there were still things that were missing. And I found myself in a very difficult situation
Right.
because a you know I had a 9 to 5. B, I was traveling at the time, and C, to craft this also was kind of something lingering in my list of things to do.
Right.
So it was a huge struggle. And even when I finished, I think a friend of mine said uh, it's good that you finished, but give it a couple of days. Give it a couple of days to sink in inside of your mind that you like the story, you believe the story is something that is well written, but take some time to think about it, okay? And maybe you can come back. And what happened was 2 days later, I was stuck in traffic, and I thought, wait a minute, I don't want the story to end like this. And I need to change something because something is missing. And I remember, calling my office and telling a colleague that, hey, listen, I can't come in tomorrow. I got something to take care of. And I basically locked myself in a room and just thought and thought and thought. And after 10 hours, I was able to craft an ending, which was very, very different from the original one. So these things, unfortunately for some of us, we don't have time. We don't
Right.
have too long, or at least I myself work on deadlines, and this book was a deadline for me too.
Mhm.
But it just, I was glad that I took that time, and I was so glad that I took the advice of that friend who said, you know, even when you finish a book, just give it a couple of days to sink in.
Exactly. So when the baby was finally delivered, so what was the feeling for that once more?
Uh, you know, the, the book the book is written for one person, um, and um, and I would like to think that one person would like it, would cherish it, would remember me in a fond way, uh, if possible, and or not possible. But the feeling on my side was I did my due diligence. I researched a lot for this novel. Actually, this novel was in the making for uh, almost 2 years. There was a significant amount of research. There's a significant amount of way of writing this. I previously thought, the novels that I wrote previously were not exactly up to par that I wanted. There was a sense of dissatisfaction. And so for this one, it was a total game changer. I said, I'm going to write this very differently compared to my other novels. And I was very happy by the time it came out like the way it did, because I said, this is good. This is a different direction I wanted to take, and I think it served me well.
Just to close that, we could talk forever. My last question to you, Fazal. Let's say that if a novel were to be adapted into a film or a miniseries, for example, who would be your dream casting for Sofia Tresca? Do you have that in mind?
Wow. You think about this. I honestly don't know because she's such a unique figure. And to even build that figure inside of my imagination took time. How do you build a person um, who's both strong and vulnerable? How do you build a person who's both beautiful but still suffers from some illness. How do you make someone look so enigmatically attractive,
Mhm.
yet they have so many flaws underneath? How do you make someone so beautiful, both inside and outside,
Mhm.
while they are haunted by memories, past
Mhm.
fears?
Mhm.
So, I'm sure there are, many notable actresses out there that I could have probably thought of, but, I think about these kind of characteristics in a person, and if an actress can, you know, make that happen in a real life, in a real scene, in a real moment, um, I would be appreciative of that. I'm sure they would master that craft in some way because it's not an easy craft to master. So yeah.
And with that, but before we go, I so how's the campaign is going?
The book initially was published in December.
September? Okay.
In December, so we've there was we kind of delayed the promotion for a little bit because we wanted to see how it fares well, particularly the my usual crowd of readers.
Okay.
But it's been slow coming, between the time we initially wanted to release it much earlier than December, but due to circumstances, we stuck to December. But hopefully this campaign will go on for a couple more months, and we'll see how readers react. So far, there have been a lot of positive reactions I've been getting, particularly with the reviews that I see. I've reached out to, of course, some of the reviews, the traditional book reviews, but of course to the readers that frequently read my work. They seem to like it with a difference. So I think that was the reaction I was looking for, and I'm glad that
Oh,
we got
okay.
there. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I'm just gonna say it's been such a pleasure to speak with my old friend, Fazle Chowdhury, prolific writer, and maybe next time we'll do it again when the next one is out. Right? That's that.
I hope so, Ardain. I hope so. Thank you for having me.